Have you ever walked into a store with a crisp $100 bill, mentally confident, and then walked out with two bags that feel weirdly light? Not because you're wasteful, not because you don't budget hard enough, but because something about money has gotten quietly unsettling. Like the price tags are moving, and your brain is still living in the old world where $100 meant something specific. Groceries, gas, a little room to breathe. And I want to talk about where that feeling is headed, because if inflation in the US keeps doing what it's been doing, by 2030, $100 won't feel like $100. It'll feel like a smaller version of it. And the scary part is how subtle that shrink is. Here's the misunderstanding most people carry around without realizing it. When we say inflation, we imagine one big monster number, like inflation is 2% or inflation is 7%. And it's either a crisis or it's fine. But inflation doesn't land in your life as one number. It lands as moments. It lands as you standing in front of a menu, doing that tiny pause before you order what you used to order without thinking. It lands as you opening a renewal notice for insurance, rent, childcare, utilities, things you can't exactly coupon your way out of. And then it lands emotionally as a very personal story. I must be doing something wrong. That's the part worth pulling apart gently, because inflation is not a moral verdict. It's not a personality test. It's a slow shift in the meaning of money, and our brains are not naturally built to update that meaning smoothly. Also, we have to say this out loud. Inflation cooling doesn't mean prices go back down. It usually just means they rise more slowly. So, if you've been waiting to feel normal again, you might be waiting on the wrong thing. Let's ground this in something real. As of the latest Consumer Price Index release for January 2026, overall CPIU prices were up 2.4% compared to a year earlier. That's the headline number people repeat. But inside that same report is the part that actually hits your nervous system. Shelter was the largest factor in that monthly increase. Energy fell in January, and core inflation, prices excluding food and energy, rose 0.3% during the month. Then, you get to the lines that feel like real life. Food away from home, basically eating out, was up 4.0% over the past year. Electricity was up 6.3%. So when someone says inflation is only 2.4% and you're thinking, then why does my life feel more expensive? It's because your personal inflation rate is not the national average. It's your basket. Your basket is rent, groceries, the car you need, the commute you can't teleport away from, the small treats you use to make life tolerable, the family expenses you don't post online. Now let's talk about the real question. What will $100 buy in 2030? First, notice something sneaky about the year 2030. It sounds far away, almost sci-fi. But from early 2026, 2030 is basically 4 years. That's one more lease cycle, one more car repair era, one more job change, one more stretch where life gets busy and receipts stop being tracked. So let's do simple math. If inflation averages 2% a year until 2030, prices are about 8% higher. That means $100 in 2030 buys what about $92 buys today. If inflation averages 3%, prices are roughly 13% higher. Now, $100 buys what about $89 buys today. If inflation averages 4%, prices are around 17% higher. Now, $100 buys what about $85 buys today. You don't need crazy inflation for money to feel different. You just need time, and time is undefeated. So what does that actually look like? Picture a normal Saturday reset kind of day. You grab coffee and something quick to eat. You go grocery shopping. You pick up household basics. Maybe a birthday gift. Maybe something annoying that broke finally gets replaced. Then you fill your tank halfway because watching the pump climb feels painful. Right now, that day might fit inside $100 if you're careful. Or maybe it already doesn't, depending on where you live. By 2030, if prices are 10 to 17% higher the same day, doesn't suddenly become impossible. It becomes tighter. And tightness is what creates financial stress. Tightness makes you calculate in public. Tightness makes you negotiate with yourself. Tightness makes every small choice feel like it has consequences. Financial stress rarely comes from dramatic collapse. It comes from repeated friction. Another layer is that not everything inflates the same way. Electronics like TVs and phones often become cheaper relative to what you get because technology improves and competition is intense. But things tied to limited supply and human labor, housing, childcare, healthcare services, insurance, repairs, don't get those same discounts. They stay sticky, and they feel personal because they're tied to safety. That's why shelter being the largest factor in CPI matters. Shelter isn't just data, it's where your life happens. Now here's the real villain, and it's not inflation itself. It's money illusion. That's the tendency to think in face value dollars instead of purchasing power. Your brain remembers groceries should cost about $60. A casual meal should be $15. Shoes should be under $80. When reality breaks that memory, it doesn't just feel expensive, it feels unfair, like the rules changed without asking you. That emotional reaction is why inflation creates so much anger. Even when wages rise, they don't rise smoothly like prices do. Prices change quietly and constantly. Wages change in awkward jumps, after reviews, promotions, job switches, negotiations you had to build courage for. So on paper, the economy can look stable while daily life feels like constant catching up. Expectations matter too. If people expect prices to rise, workers negotiate differently and businesses price differently. That feedback loop is why central banks focus heavily on inflation targets. The Federal Reserve's long-run target is about 2% inflation, and many projections suggest inflation gradually cooling toward that level by 2030. Even in that normal scenario, $100 still quietly loses weight. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. So, what will $100 buy in 2030? A slightly smaller version of your life. Not a different life, a smaller one. Because most of us use money to buy emotional stability. Groceries are control, gas is reliability, eating out is relief, and inflation makes relief more expensive. Stop treating $100 like a fixed object. Treat it like a melting ice cube. Once you accept dollars aren't stable over long periods, you stop fighting the last decade. The goal isn't recreating old prices. The goal is building resilience. Update your price expectations intentionally. Build breathing room into your budget. Separate lifestyle upgrades from inflation. Understand investing as protection against shrinking purchasing power. And give yourself credit. You're managing money in a world where prices constantly move. So, what will $100 buy in 2030? Probably something like $85 to $92 worth of today's life. Not because the world is ending, because that's what time does to money. Stability doesn't come from frozen prices. It comes from adaptable systems, margin, fewer surprises, and thinking about money in a way that fits the real world. You're not behind because $100 feels different. You're just living through the quiet shrinking. And progress beats perfection. Small, consistent changes are how people build peace with money until numbers stop feeling like threats and start feeling like information again.